The Daughters of the Black Fang Tempest Trials is our last event in the Triple Tempest Gauntlet. Don't worry though, because we'll be farming Tempest Trials in Engage 2. For this event, hitting the maximum 50,000 points can net you 42 orbs, 11,000 feathers, and 80 sacred coins. We've headed back around to Ephemeral 1 divine codes, and there is Fire Blessing for legendary shares. For sacred seals, we have Fortify Dragons and Rouse Atk in defense. The reward unit for this month is Khadein Soren. You can earn a 4-star and 5-star copy. We'll be talking about him more later on. First up, Fortify Dragons is another Emblem team buff turned Sacred Seal. At start of turn, grant plus 6 defense and res to adjacent dragons for 1 turn. We actually already have Honed Dragons as a Sacred Seal, so you could bring both on a team. If you want Honed Dragons in the C slot, then you can inherit it from Halloween Nails, and that will let you fully buff up any adjacent dragon allies. We have a War Dragon Sacred Seal for plus 4 defense and res, and a C slot version on Halloween Ina that can give your teammates plus 10 defense and res effectively. This won't be a must-use Sacred Seal unless you're running multiple dragons, and there's not a huge reason to not just use the C skill instead. It basically just depends on if you already have a C skill you want to run, but you still want the field buffs. Good news though is that you don't need to upgrade this seal. Once you have it, it's good to go. Next up, we have a new skill line turned Sacred Seal. Rouse Atk in defense 3 states, at start of turn, if unit is not adjacent to an ally, grant plus 6 attack and defense field buffs for 1 turn. Rouse buffs are for infantry and cavalry only and play into the solo type playstyle, which is why they are commonly paired with solo A skills and Sacred Seals. Like with the newer Oath Sacred Seals, it's not really better to run the self-field buffing skills as Sacred Seals over their C slot counterparts. As C skills, you can just stack the field buffs with the in-combat buffs from solo seals. The only main reason you would run a Rouse Sacred Seal is if you absolutely need field buffs for something like Bonus Doubler or Claw's total buff/debuff mechanic. It could also matter in at start of combat stat checks, but otherwise in combat, the numbers all just total together. Technically, it does give you more seal options for specific stat combinations, like we only get 1 attack and defense solo seal, but Rouse Atk and defense can give the same stat boost on a second unit. Personally, I still think upgrading the solo seals first are better, since you have multiple free-to-play options to get the Rouse C skills. It's not a bad seal, but not a must upgrade right now type skill.
Another festival? I'm not much for social gatherings. I didn't learn magic by choice. Still, I consider myself fortunate to have the ability.
The heroic Grail Khadein mage for this event is Soren, and this is counted as Radiant Dawn Soren. He's a blue infantry mage with 38 HP, 43 attack, 34 speed, 18 defense, and 45 res. Soren, I believe, has the highest base res stat in the game, and because we skipped from base 43 to 45, no one can catch him despite not having super boons. I believe some units can tie him with dragon flowers, but regardless, impressive res stat. Soren will have rather high base attack as well, but his speed is in that weird 34 middle ground, and his defense is not great at all. Soren will be able to take magical hits and can do some damage, but he risks getting outspeed by offensive units, and any physical damage won't end well. For his weapon, Soren brings the inheritable Magical Lantern Plus, 12 might, and at start of turn, if unit is within 2 spaces of an ally, grant unit cannot be slowed by terrain, and special cooldown charge +1 per attack during combat for 1 turn. If Soren initiates combat or is within 2 spaces of an ally, he gets +5 attack and res during combat. So like the other Khadein weapons, Magical Lantern Plus can give any blue mage the terrain ignoring status. As a reminder, for infantry, this means forest tiles do not affect them, and for blue mage cavaliers, they can run straight through trenches. Magical Lantern will add attack and res for stats, but it also grants a breath type cooldown status, which is interesting. Mages cannot run steady breath skills, so this gives them really good cooldown reduction, and you don't need to stat check with like heavy or flashing blade. For mage flyers and cavaliers, this is neat because they can only use heavy blade. For the few blue armored mages, I think Special Fighter 4 might be more enticing, but it could let you run a quicker post fighter skill as well. Generally speaking, breath type cooldown is great, but is that enough? I do feel you can do something interesting things with it, but there are some concerns in how effective those things actually are. We'll talk about it more when we get to builds. Coming back to Soren's base kit, it does work with the Magical Lantern. Glacius is a no-brainer, and 2 actions will charge it up thanks to the extra special cooldown. For his A skill, Soren stacks more attack and res with attack and res form 3. He then brings in an actually rare skill in Infantry Breath 3. As the name suggests, this grants adjacent infantry allies +2 defense res and breath type special cooldown. The C skill was only on Na beforehand, and she recently got it refined, which kind of made it redundant on her. Soren can now pass on the cooldown support if you don't have other methods like Thor or Brave Lucina. The main drawback of Infantry Breath is needing to be adjacent to the ally. Bulwark can partially solve this problem for a main tank, however without the super obstruct effect, it will leave the Infantry Breath user vulnerable. Luckily, Bulwark is only usable by infantry anyway. I think getting this skill on a heroic grow unit would have felt more impactful a couple years ago, but we have a bunch of newer sources of cooldown reduction, and units like Thor can give breath type cooldown to any unit type. Still, it's nice to see such a rare skill, it's something different at least. Overall, Khadein Soren is a res stacking machine and who has cooldown reduction via his tome. He can also pass it around to infantry allies. If you plan to merge Soren, the neutral nature will give you +1 HP attack and resistance. That's fine to keep unless you want to go for a res boon to assert full dominance over magic damage. If you wanted to try boosting Soren's speed, then a speed boon would also be appreciated. There is a lot of competition when it comes to heroic grail and demoted blue infantry mages. Khadein Soren does make his mark as the premier attack and res stacker. Reeve from last year does a similar job but loses any kind of speed to try and salvage. Strangely, there is an 8 BST gap between these two despite only being one generation apart. I think it's because Reeve is on the lower end of the BST group while Soren's on the higher end. Still, it's a really big jump. For other similar units to Soren, there is Sias, and I'll just mention Oliver out of respect. Sias has a debuffing refine that can help the team and boost his own attack. Meanwhile, Oliver is kinda just only stacking attack and res. If you wanted a higher res blue mage with some defense, then Sonya is the tanky go-to. A faster unit kind of with the Soren Sias stat spread is Brunya. Her from Bolvator should get a refine relatively soon, and that could be interesting. For a more offensive option, there is Fallen Delthea, whose death refine added some fun warping options. Delthea is probably one of the more fun merge projects in this category since her weapon grants +9 to all stats, which you can take in various directions. Like many weapon groups, we continue to just play the waiting game for the next arcane inheritable weapon. Surprisingly, some of these units have their own decent niches and probably don't need the arcane blue tome as badly. Reeve has the closest attack and res to Soren, but Argent Aura is so unique with its support perks. Fallen Delthea's death can stand on its own, and I feel like Brunya's from Bolvator could end up being pretty decent too. If you're just looking to stack resistance, then Soren wins hands down. Dragonflowers will not catch the others up to that. His base attack is also quite high. If we look at the demoted blue mages, we have even more close comparisons. Khadein Soren is basically the next generation of Ileana and Tatiana. High res, decent attack, some speed, and garbage defense. Mei could also fall under that group, but her res is not nearly as high enough. If you're looking for speed, most of the blue mages are not that fast. Mirio is the go-to for pure offense if you just want to focus on speed. There are a lot more hungry demoted blue mages waiting for an arcane blue tome. Once again, Soren will excel in attack and res, although his HP is on the lower side to compensate. If the arcane blue tome doesn't depend on resistance for whatever it does, then it's basically a choose your favorite between Soren, Ileana, and Tatiana. For general playstyle, Soren will be able to tank a ton of magic damage, and he has decent attack to counter back. It mainly comes down to what you want to do with his awkward 34 base speed. If you just want to tank it out, you could stack all the attack and res and run quicker posts. With Magical Lantern's breath type cooldown, you get Glaciers to proc on the second hit, and that will be a ton of damage. If you want to instantly reply with a special, Soren will need to go with Glimmer or Moonbow if you're on a budget. With the quick riposte setup, if Soren gets doubled, you can also just get off 2 Glimmer procs, but he is taking a lot of punishment as well. If you want to save up for the next round, you could use an area effect special. Only takes 2 actions to charge them up, and it could give Soren some player phase power. You aren't maximizing AoE damage here, but Soren has decent base attack to start with. For some other fun options, Attack and Res Ideal 3 is fine with the Magical Lantern since it grants status effects. You won't have to worry about positioning limits of solo or farm skills. If you want some speed with resistance, we have the lone Speed and Res Solo 3 on Urk. You can pair that with another Speed Solo Sacred Seal. Dull Ranged Vantage Desperation can go in the B slot. If you want to stack flat resistance for Sabotage or Ploy debuffs, you could use Fortress Res, but honestly I think Fury is fine for Soren since he's at the top of the base res stats. Another support option could be used with Infantry Breath is Infantry Hexblade. Cooldown and adaptive damage is fun, but you gotta get up close. If you want to go full premium, Magical Lantern can facilitate a special spiral build. In fact, with the new Times Pulse 4, you can sort of replicate Rearmed Ophelia's setup. The basic idea is that Times Pulse puts Iceberg on 2 cooldown. If Soren tanks a hit, Iceberg is charged and you can unleash it on the counter. If you have the tier 4 special spiral, you get extra damage and DR piercing. Then, to truly copy the Arcane Eclipse, you need Times Pulse 4 because it grants -1 cooldown after combat. With Special Spiral, this covers the full 3 cooldowns since we don't have accelerated specials. Complete the build with a Finish 4A skill. Attack and Res Finish 4 is best for burst damage, but Speed and Res Finish is on the 4-star focus Khadein if you can't get anything else. You could also use Mirror Impact, but you don't get any enemy phase stats if you need it. The only difference between this setup and Ophelia's setup is that Arcane Eclipse will charge Iceberg on turn 1, thanks to accelerated specials and its built-in Quick Pulse. To be fair, any weapon can pull off the 3 cooldown Iceberg special spam since it's only Special Spiral and times Pulse 4 doing all the recharging. However, Magical Lantern can get the build going because taking 1 hit will get Iceberg charged and it gives attack and res, which is what we care about. This nuking build does not rely on speed and it can handle damage reduction while playing off of Soren's 2 best stats. You can also use infantry pulse support to just skip to the fun Iceberg spam. In that case though, you don't really need Magical Lantern. For other premium skills, Soren could use Close Ward to fight and tank dragons, enemy phase focused, but it's an option, and New Year's Plumeria is currently rerunning, which is the only way to get it. You could use Ruptured Sky with this build and you'll charge it in 1 hit. Another enemy phase skill is Quicker Pulse 4 if you want some damage reduction. One of the few ways for Soren to get it. Main issue with Special Spiral 4 and Quicker Pulse 4 is that they are on rearmed heroes, and who knows when those guys are coming back. Moving on, tempo skills could be interesting to ensure Magical Lantern's cooldown does its job. Guard would be nice for defensive builds, so either the Sacred Seal version or the tier 3 dual stance. If you want to try for an offensive build, Soren will need speed. He's better off than most not pure offensive units if you want to do a speed build, but obviously he's not going to be outspeeding everything. If you want to drop glaces on enemies via doubles, you probably need no follow-up somewhere in your build. Remote Sparrow does offer damage reduction, but literally any physical damage taken is going to be rough. Regarding other inheritable weapons, the realistic answer is just wait and see what the Arcane Blue Tome is going to be. If you want a speed boosting tome, Flower Guide was on Summer Loot, who was an ephemera option last year. For attack debuffs, Pack Blooms from Valentine's Veronica is still one of the better options all around. With Soren's bad defense though, I think Magical Lantern is generally better to keep. Our 3rd Tempest Trials in a row is alright. Our 2 Sacred Seals are nice but not must upgrades unless you have specific uses for them. As for Khadein Soren, he comes with some incredible attack and res stats. As a blue infantry mage, he has a ton of competition, and there are several units who can have quite similar stat spreads, albeit Soren min-maxes the most. His Magical Lantern Plus is actually quite interesting since mages do not get steady breath type cooldown easily. It can give the mage flyers or cavaliers a new cooldown option. For Soren specifically, as a high attack and res, middling speed, and very low defense mage, this class kinda just has issues against literally anything that is not another major healer. Back in the good old days, this type of mage could at least wall off dragons, but since dragons got adaptive damage, you need Mystic Boost or the niche Close Ward to not immediately get roasted. You then have literally every other physical damage dealer potentially one-shotting Soren without needing a special, combined with the fact Distant Counter has not gone away for 6 years. This has only gotten worse with far save skills. To kind of prove this point, Legend of Deirdre is a recent mage with Soren's stat spread. They gave her an entire miracle effect to survive taking damage. Another major turnoff for high attack mages in general is that damage reduction is way too common. Only recently have infantry mages gotten a way to pierce DR with Special Spiral 4. On the flip side, not a lot of ways for mages to get damage reduction themselves. We just got Remote Spiral, which is a player phase option for DR. You then have the awkward speed stat. If Soren invests in it, you won't catch up to the fastest units out there, and even an offensive build runs back into the issue of taking any kind of physical damage counterattack. So, the question begs, what does an Arcane Blue Tome need to have for Khadein Soren to use it well? Generic, always good perks would be accelerated specials and a free follow-up. To fit the high-res mages specifically, maybe some kind of res checking mechanic, perhaps a fire sweep type effect, or maybe a way to pierce or cut into damage reduction. Currently, most arcane weapons are trying to fit many various stat spreads, which might be bad for Soren's min-maxed attack and res. I think to really help these types of mages, they need skills catered to the resistance, such as dragons having Dragon Wall. I think tier 4 versions of ploys and sabotages could work, but those skills would need to do more than just apply debuffs. Preferably, I would like to see a res-based skill that works for any mage class because there are quite a lot of cavalry and flying mages who also have the same type of stat spread. To wrap things up, Soren will be at the top of the list if you need high attack and res for a blue mage. The issue is what that archetype of mage currently offers feels kinda lacking. I personally don't see the Arcane Blue Tome fixing those issues unless it specifically caters to higher res stats, which I don't see happening. I think any changes to this archetype have to come from new skills, whether it's offensive or defensive. Khadein Soren might have a time to shine thanks to his stats, but currently there aren't many ways to utilize his strengths unless you just go for fighting other mages only, or you just go for the full-on nuking build with specials. I don't think the Special Spiral 4 route for mages is bad, but it's very one-dimensional. Let me know your thoughts on Khadein Soren, and regardless of how you feel, do continue farming the Tempest Trials for all those rewards. All those Tempest Orbs have helped me replenish my stash tremendously. Have fun farming, and I'll be back soon to talk about this month's Ephemeral Combat Manuals. See you there.